The text arrived at 11:27 at night, warning me to stay away because Karen did not want to see me. I stared at the screen, then called the clubhouse to cancel every dime I had paid. Yet I went anyway. As the memorial wreath was lowered onto the podium, my billionaire sister leaned in and whispered the words that stopped my heart. She said, "She is not our president. She is just yours." My name is Luna Hayes, and for 34 years I operated under the assumption that Willow Creek Estates was a community pact. It turns out the HOA was just a line item on a spreadsheet, and mine was constantly in the red. The text message arrived at 11:27 at night. It was short, cold, and surgical. It read simply, "Do not come to the memorial tomorrow. Karen does not feel comfortable with you there. Please do not make this harder than it already is." I sat on the edge of my bed in my cramped townhouse, the blue light of the phone illuminating the piles of HOA violation notices I had organized on the duvet. My name is Luna Hayes, and I am the responsible one. I am the one who fixes things. I am the one who pays. The irony of the message felt like a physical blow to the sternum. They were uninviting me from an event that I had effectively produced. I looked down at the invoice from the event planner. It was stamped paid in full. The total came to $14,500. I had drained my emergency savings and maxed out 2 credit cards to cover it because Mom had grabbed my hand in the hospital. Her grip surprisingly strong for a dying woman, and made me promise. She wanted the mahogany podium, the lilies from the specific florist 2 towns over, the catered spread that followed every single HOA rule about community-appropriate food, no plastic forks, no paper plates, everything biodegradable and color-coordinated in Willow Creek beige. Karen, the woman I called president, had stood in the corner of the hospital room looking out the window, claiming her grief was too profound to discuss logistics. So I did what I always did. I stepped up, and now 6 hours before the service, I was being told to stay away. I did not cry. Crying implies a loss. And at that moment, I did not feel loss. I felt a sudden violent clarity. It was the feeling of a diver realizing the oxygen tank on their back is actually filled with carbon monoxide. I picked up my phone and dialed the clubhouse. It was late, but I knew the night manager forwarded calls to his cell. When Mr. Henderson answered, his voice was thick with sleep. I did not apologize. "I need to cancel the contract," I said. My voice sounded calm, which terrified me more than if I had been screaming. "Ms. Hayes?" Mr. Henderson asked, confused. "The service is tomorrow morning. Everything is set." "I am the contract holder," I said. "I am the one who signed the check. I am exercising my right to cancel the services provided under my name. The flowers, the catering, the premium AV setup. Cancel it all." "But the body, your mother," he stammered. "Keep her there," I said. "But do not open the doors. Do not put out the flowers I paid for. Do not let the hearse leave the garage if it is on my dime. If they want a memorial, they can pay for it." I hung up. Felt like cutting a lifeline. For decades, my role in Willow Creek was to be the financial, emotional support animal. I paid the overdue special assessments when the treasury ran dry. I covered the emergency roof levy on the clubhouse when Karen forgot. I was the safety net. Tonight, I took the net away. I stared at the ceiling for the rest of the night. I waited for the panic to set in, for the guilt to crush me, but it never came. At 7:15 the next morning, my phone rang. It was Mr. Henderson again. "Luna," he said, his voice crisp and professional now. "I am calling to inform you that the cancellation order has been voided." "Excuse me?" I asked, gripping the phone. "A new payment was processed at 6 a.m. this morning," he said. "The previous funds you provided are being refunded to your cards. The service will proceed as planned. However, the new contract holder has requested some changes to the program." "What changes?" I asked. though I already knew the answer. "You have been removed from the list of speakers," he said, "and the family seating chart has been adjusted." I hung up. They had not just uninvited me. They had erased me. They had bought me out of my own mother's memorial. I showered and dressed in black. Not the soft morning black of a grieving daughter, but the sharp armored black of a woman going to war. I drove to the clubhouse, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The refund notification hit my phone as I parked. $14,500. Returned like a rejected gift. I walked into the chapel. The air smelled of lilies. The ones I had ordered, now paid for by someone else. The room was half full. Neighbors from Willow Creek, old friends of Mom, people who knew the version of our community that we presented to the world. I walked down the center aisle, heads turned. I could hear the whispers. People knew I was the one who took care of Mom. They expected me to be greeting them at the door, handing out programs, managing the tears. Instead, I walked past them, my spine rigid, straight to the front row. Karen Voss sat like a queen in exile. She was wearing a pastel cardigan I had seen her wear to every HOA meeting for 3 years. She looked tragic and composed, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. She was staring at the podium with a practiced intensity. As I approached, she did not look at me. She did not flinch. She just stared straight ahead as if I were a ghost. She refused to acknowledge. There was a space next to her, usually reserved for the president and board. A clipboard was placed on the seat to her right, guarding it. I did not ask permission. I simply moved the clipboard to the floor and sat down. Karen stiffened. I could feel the heat radiating off her, a mix of anger and fear. She still did not look at me. "You should not be here, Luna," she hissed under her breath, her lips barely moving. I looked at the podium. "I paid for this cardigan, Karen," I whispered back. "I am going to see it worn." She went silent. She was a woman who crumbled under direct confrontation, preferring to manipulate from the shadows. My presence was a variable she had not calculated. Then the doors at the back of the chapel opened again. The silence in the room shifted. It became heavier, charged with a different kind of electricity. Sloane had arrived. My younger sister. The one who left Willow Creek at 18 and never looked back. The one who made the cover of business magazines. The one who sold her tech startup for 9 figures and became a ghost to us, sending checks that Karen cashed and I never saw. She walked down the aisle and the air seemed to leave the room. She was not wearing traditional morning clothes. She wore a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car. Her sunglasses were dark, hiding her eyes, but she was not alone. Walking a step behind her was a man I had never seen before. He was tall, dressed in a black suit that fit him like a second skin. He did not look like a boyfriend or a husband. He scanned the room with the detached, predatory gaze of a security detail or a very expensive lawyer. He carried a leather briefcase, not a Bible. Sloane reached the front row. She stopped in front of Karen. She did not hug her. She did not touch her shoulder. She merely nodded, a gesture devoid of any warmth. Then she turned to me. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red, the only sign that she was human. She looked at me for a long moment, studying my face as if she were trying to solve an equation. "Move," she said to Karen. It was not a request. Karen blinked, looking up at her with a mixture of awe and resentment. She shuffled to the left, making space between us. Sloane sat down right next to me, her shoulder pressing against mine. The man in black stood behind us, his back against the wall, a silent sentinel. The service began. The officiant spoke about Mom's kindness, her patience, her long-suffering. He left out the part about her anxiety, her fear of opening the mail, the way she would hide HOA violation notices in the laundry hamper. I stared at the podium, feeling a numbness spreading through my chest. I tried to remember the last thing Mom said to me. It was about the money. It was always about the money. "Make sure Karen is okay," she had whispered. "Don't let her sink." "Luna." I felt a hand on my arm. I turned. Sloane was leaning in close, her breath warm against my ear. The smell of expensive perfume and stale cigarettes wafted from her. She looked at Karen, who was dabbing her dry eyes with a handkerchief, performing her grief for the audience behind us. Then she looked back at me. Her gaze was intense, terrifyingly lucid. "She is not our president," she whispered. The words were soft, barely a breath, but they hit me with the force of a freight train. I froze. I looked at her, confusion knitting my brow. I thought she was speaking metaphorically, the way angry residents disown their board. I thought she meant Karen had not been a good president. But Sloane shook her head slightly as if reading my thoughts. She leaned closer, her lips brushing my hair. "She is just yours, Luna." The world tilted on its axis. The organ music seemed to distort, stretching into a low, dissonant hum. I looked at Karen. I looked at her profile. The nose I thought the whole neighborhood had inherited from her leadership. The jawline I saw in the mirror every time I checked the grass height. If she was just mine, that meant she was my president, but it meant she was not Sloane's. I looked at Sloane. We shared the same mother. That was undeniable. But if Karen was not her president, then who was? And why did Karen treat her like the golden child while I was treated like the help? Sloane pulled back, her face composed, staring straight ahead at the podium. She had dropped a bomb in my lap and then returned to watching the show. My heart hammered against my ribs. Questions flooded my mind, drowning out the officiant's eulogy. If she was not her president, did she know? Did Mom know? Was this why Sloane left? My phone buzzed in my clutch. A single sharp vibration. I should have ignored it. It was a memorial. But the adrenaline was coursing through me, making me irrational. I slipped the phone out, shielding the screen with my hand. It was an automated email from the HOA bank. A generic notification. Subject: Action required. Cosigner verification for special assessment loan. I frowned. I had not applied for a loan. I had just frozen my spending. I opened the email, my thumb hovering over the screen. The details loaded. It was a request for a personal line of credit. The amount was $25,000. The stated purpose was memorial and bereavement expenses. The primary applicant was Karen Voss. The cosigner listed was Luna Hayes. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring. She had done it again. Even here, even now. While sitting 5 feet away from her dead community pillar, while I sat next to her, she had used my social security number to apply for a loan to pay for a memorial that Sloane had already paid for. She wasn't just grieving, she was cashing in. I looked up from the phone. Karen was sobbing now, her shoulders shaking. The congregation behind us was murmuring in sympathy. I looked at the email again. The application timestamp was 8:30 this morning. She had done it from her phone while waiting for the hearse. Sloane's whisper echoed in my head. "She is just yours." I looked at the woman who was supposedly my president. She was not just mine. She was my parasite, and she had just tried to feed on me one last time. The silence in my townhouse that evening was heavy, a sharp contrast to the murmurs and false sympathies of the memorial service. I had left the cemetery before the reception. I could not stomach the idea of eating cold sandwiches next to the woman who had tried to monetize my grief while the dirt was still fresh on my mother's grave. Sloane had disappeared into a black SUV with her security detail, leaving me with nothing but that whispered sentence echoing in my skull. "She is not our president. She is just yours." I sat at my kitchen table, a glass of water sweating onto the wood. I did not drink it. Instead, I opened my laptop. For years, I had told myself that I was helping, that I was the good resident, the reliable one. In every HOA, there are casting roles assigned before we even know how to read the covenants. Sloane was the fragile one, the wild one, the one who needed to be protected from the harsh edges of the world. And I was the concrete. I was the foundation. Mom used to cup my face in her hands, her skin smelling of lavender and anxiety, and say, "Luna, you are so strong. You can handle anything. Karen is different. She feels things too much. We have to look out for her." I believed her. I wore that strength like a badge of honor, not realizing it was actually a yoke. Being the strong one just meant I was the one they felt comfortable burdening. It meant my needs were always secondary because surely Luna could figure it out. Luna always figured it out. I clicked on a folder buried deep in my hard drive. It was password protected. I typed in the code, a sequence of numbers that corresponded to the date I paid off the first major fine Karen had accrued in my name. The file opened. It was a spreadsheet titled Ledger HOA Overages.xlsx. It was not a diary of words. It was a diary of numbers. It was the mathematical proof of my exploitation. I had started it 10 years ago, fresh out of college. When Karen had asked me to cover $200 for a utility bill on the clubhouse, I had recorded it, thinking I would be reimbursed. I never was. I scrolled down. The rows went on for pages. August 12, 2014, $550. Car repair for the community van. Karen crashed. December 3rd, 2015, $1,200 property tax delinquency notice I found hidden in the clubhouse drawer. July 19th, 2018, $4,000 roof leak that Karen said she had fixed herself until the water came pouring into the meeting room, ruining the hardwood. I looked at the totals. Over a decade, I had poured nearly $85,000 into the HOA on Willow Creek. That was money for a down payment on my own home, money for a wedding I never had, money for a life I never got to start because I was too busy patching up theirs. But as I looked at the entries from the last 18 months, the pattern changed. The amounts were larger, the frequency was higher, and the explanations were vague. There was a transfer of $3,000 last March. The note in my spreadsheet reads simply, "Karen said it was for Mom's specialist." I frowned. Mom had Medicare. She had supplemental insurance. Why did she need $3,000 in cash for a specialist? Then there was a charge for legal fees. $2,500 paid to a firm I did not recognize. When I had asked Karen about it at the time, she had waved her hand and said it was a dispute with a neighbor over a property line. I had believed her. I always believed her because the alternative was to admit that my president was a liar. But now, staring at the screen, the numbers looked different. They looked like evidence. I opened a subfolder where I kept scans of documents. I found the power of attorney form. It was dated 6 months ago. Mom had been weak then, her mind drifting in and out of focus due to the pain medication. Karen had presented the document to me, saying we needed it to manage her medical bills. I had signed as a witness. I zoomed in on the document now. Mom's signature was at the bottom. Usually, by that stage of her illness, her handwriting was a tremor, a shaky spiderweb of ink. But this signature was firm. It was looping and confident. It looked like her signature from 10 years ago, not the signature of a dying woman. My stomach turned. I had been in the room, but I had been distracted making coffee in the kitchen while Karen helped her with the paperwork. Had I actually seen the pen touch the paper? I closed the image and went to my email. The loan notification from the memorial had triggered something in me. A suspicion that perhaps that was not the only time she had tried to use my name. I went to my spam folder. Usually, I deleted everything in there without looking. Offers for male enhancement pills, Nigerian princes, and miracle weight loss cures. But today, I scrolled slowly. I saw it. Hidden among the junk was an email from a credit card company. Subject: Application received. Thank you for your interest. It was dated 3 weeks ago. I searched for the keyword application. The search results filled the screen. There were dozens of them. Confirmations of applications for store credit cards. Inquiries for personal lines of credit. Notifications of address changes. My heart hammered against my ribs. How had I missed this? Why hadn't I received phone calls? Usually, when you apply for credit, especially this much of it, the bank calls to verify. I opened one of the confirmation emails from a major bank. It listed the contact information for the applicant. Name Luna Hayes. Address: 402 Maple Lane, Willow Creek Estates. Phone: 555-0198. I froze. My phone number ended in 0199. It was a single-digit difference. A typo? No. A typo happens once. I checked the next email. The same wrong number. I checked a third. The same. It was a trick. A deliberate, calculated maneuver. If the bank called to verify the application, they would dial the number listed. If the person who answered confirmed the identity, the loan would go through. Karen had not just stolen my identity. She had rerouted it. She had created a ghost version of me that lived in her phone, ready to say yes to every debt she wanted to accrue. I grabbed my phone and dialed the fraud department of the bank from the most recent email. It was nearly midnight, but the automated system eventually connected me to a human being. Security department, this is Mark. How can I help you? My voice was steady, the icy calm of disaster management taking over. My name is Luna Hayes. I am looking at an application reference number on my screen. I did not make this application. There was the sound of typing on the other end. One moment. Ms. Hayes, let me pull this up. The silence stretched for 30 seconds. Felt like an hour. Okay, I see the application here, Mark said, his tone shifting from polite to professional. It was submitted online 2 days ago. The status is currently pending verification. I need you to cancel it, I said. And I need to know if there are others. More typing. The clicking of the keys sounded like gunshots in my quiet townhouse. Ms. Hayes, Mark said slowly. I am looking at your profile. We show 7 attempts to open lines of credit in the last 4 weeks. 2 were rejected automatically. 3 are pending. 2 were approved and cards were issued. Approved. I felt the blood drain from my face. Where were the cards sent? They were mailed to the address on file, Mark said. 402 Maple Lane. That is not my address, I said. That is my mother's house. I see, Mark said, and the phone number used for verification. It is incorrect, I said. It is off by 1 digit. There was a pause. Ms. Hayes, I am going to flag this account for fraud immediately. We will freeze the issued cards. But I have to ask, do you know who resides at that address? I closed my eyes. I could see the house, the peeling white paint, the porch swing where Mom used to sit, the office where Karen spent her days, supposedly managing the HOA affairs. Yes, I whispered. I know who lives there. There is something else, Mark said, his voice lowering slightly, breaking protocol to offer a human warning. The applications, they are coming from the same IP address. And based on the metadata, they are being submitted between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. I looked at the clock on my wall. It was just past midnight. Karen was a night owl. She always had been. She claimed it was her creative time. I realize now that her creativity was entirely focused on how to extract value from the people who loved her. The feeling of betrayal was not a sharp knife. It was a dull, heavy stone in my gut. This was not just desperation. This was a system. She had set up a parallel infrastructure to siphon my creditworthiness. She knew I had a good job. She knew I paid my bills. She saw my credit score not as an achievement, but as a resource to be mined. "Thank you, Mark," I said. "Please freeze everything." I hung up the phone. I went back to the spreadsheet. I added a new column. I titled it Fraud. I began to type in the amounts Mark had mentioned. $5,000 here, $10,000 there. As I typed, a memory surfaced. A memory from when I was 12. I had saved up my allowance for months to buy a specific pair of sneakers. I kept the money in a jar on my dresser. One day the jar was empty. When I ran to Mom crying, Karen had come into the room. She told me that she had borrowed it for community expenses because things were tight. She told me I was being selfish for caring about shoes when the neighborhood needed funds. Mom had hugged me and told me I was such a good helper. She made me feel proud that my loss had saved the community. I realize now that they had been training me. They were grooming me to accept theft as loyalty. My phone buzzed again. I looked at it, expecting another fraud alert, but it was a text from a number I did not have saved. "You need to check the basement." I stared at the message. I did not know who sent it, but my mind raced back to the house on Maple Lane. The basement was Karen's domain. It was where she kept her old tax files, her broken tools, her secrets. I looked at the spreadsheet again. The total over 10 years was staggering, but it was just money. The text message suggested something worse. I stood up. I could not stay in this townhouse. The walls were closing in. I needed to see. I grabbed my keys and my coat. It was a 2-hour drive to Willow Creek. I would get there by 3 a.m. The drive was a blur of highway lights and dark thoughts. I thought about Sloan. Why had she come back? Why did she bring a bodyguard? What did she know that I didn't? When I pulled up to the house, it was dark. The driveway was empty, save for Karen's old truck. The house looked like a sleeping beast. I parked down the street, not wanting to wake her. I still had my key. I was the one who paid for the new lock on the front door 2 years ago. After all, I walked up the driveway, the gravel crunching softly under my boots. I reached the porch. I put the key in the lock, turned smoothly. I stepped inside. The house smelled of dust and old paper. The silence was thick. I crept toward the basement door. It was located in the kitchen. As I reached for the handle, I saw a sliver of light coming from underneath the door. She was awake. I hesitated. My hand hovered over the brass knob. If I opened this door, there was no going back. I would not be the beautiful resident anymore. I would be an intruder. I would be the enemy. But then I remembered the spreadsheet. I remembered the fake phone number. I remembered the signature that looked too strong for a dying woman. I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The stairs creaked. I took a step down. "Karen," I called out softly. There was a sudden scuffling sound from below. The sound of paper being shoved into drawers. The sound of a laptop lid snapping shut. "Who is there?" Karen's voice was sharp, fearful. "It is me," I said, descending the stairs. I reached the bottom. The basement had been converted into a makeshift office. Filing cabinets lined the walls. A shredder sat in the corner, overflowing with strips of white paper. Karen was standing behind a large oak desk. She was wearing her bathrobe. Her face was pale in the light of the desk lamp. "Luna," she stammered. "What are you doing here?" "It is 3 o'clock in the morning." I walked toward the desk. I saw a stack of envelopes. They were addressed to me, but they had been opened. I saw a credit card, brand new, gleaming gold in the dim light. It had my name on it. I did not answer her question. I looked at the shredder. I looked at the envelopes. I picked up the credit card. "You intercepted my mail," I said. My voice was flat. Karen's eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for an excuse. "I was just holding it for you," she said, a nervous smile twitching at the corner of her mouth. "With your mother passing, I knew you would be overwhelmed. I was going to give it to you. I looked at the activation sticker on the card. It had been removed. You activated it, Karen. She took a step back. Luna, you do not understand. The expense is the memorial. I did it for us. I looked past her. To the wall behind the desk. Tacked to the corkboard were photos. But they were not community photos. They were photos of Sloane. Photos of her leaving her office building in New York. Photos of her getting into cars. Photos taken from a distance. And next to them were printouts of property records. Not just our house, but my townhouse building. And Sloane's penthouse listed in a public registry. Karen followed my gaze. She lunged forward, trying to block my view. Do not look at that, she shouted, her voice cracking. But I had already seen enough. This wasn't just about paying bills. This was surveillance. She wasn't just a desperate president. She was a predator mapping out her prey. And then I saw the map. It was a map of Willow Creek. But there were red pins stuck in various locations. One was our house. One was the bank. But there was a third pin. It was stuck in a location on the outskirts of town. An old industrial park that had been abandoned for years. Next to the pin was a sticky note with a single word written in Karen's handwriting. Collateral. I looked at her. The woman who raised me. The woman who I thought was just incompetent with money. What is at the industrial park? Karen? I asked. Her face hardened. The fear vanished, replaced by a cold, ugly sneer. You are just like her, she spat. Always asking questions you do not want the answers to. Go home, Luna, before you find something that makes you wish you were the one in that coffin. I stood my ground, but my hands were shaking because for the first time, I realized that the danger wasn't just financial. I turned to leave, clutching the stolen credit card in my hand. As I reached the top of the stairs, I looked back. Karen was already on the phone dialing a number. She is here, she whispered into the receiver. We have a problem. I ran out of the house, my heart pounding in my ears. I didn't know who she was calling, but I knew one thing for certain. The community I had spent my life trying to save was already dead. What was left was something else entirely, something hungry. The notification arrived at 9:15 in the morning. It was a forward, a digital slip of the tongue sent by my Aunt Linda, a woman who meant well but possessed the technological literacy of a turnip. She had intended to forward the location of the post-memorial brunch to her daughter. Instead, she had forwarded an invitation to a calendar event titled HOA Estate Reading. The time listed was 10 o'clock. The location was the offices of Holloway and Associates. I stared at my phone. No one had invited me. In fact, based on the icy silence from Karen since I fled the house the night before, I was explicitly excluded. The reading of a will is the final scene of the community tragedy. The moment where the curtain falls and the actors fight over the props. Karen intended to perform this scene without the main antagonist present. I did not shower. I did not change out of the clothes I had worn to invade the basement. I simply brushed my teeth, drank a shot of espresso that tasted like battery acid, and drove to the address listed in the text. Holloway and Associates was located in a strip mall that had seen better days, wedged between a dry cleaner and a payday loan center. It was the kind of law firm that specialized in accidents and quick divorces, places where desperation was the primary currency. I walked through the front door at 9:55. The receptionist, a woman with hair dyed a shade of red that did not exist in nature, looked up from her computer. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice guarded. "I am here for the HOA reading," I said. She glanced at a printed list on her desk. I saw her eyes scan down, then up again. "I am sorry," she said. "I do not have a Luna Hayes on the list of attendees." Ms. Voss was quite specific about who was expected. "I bet she was," I said. I walked past her desk toward the heavy oak door at the end of the hallway. "Ma'am, you cannot go in there," she shouted, scrambling to stand up. I ignored her. I gripped the handle of the conference room door and shoved it open. The room was small and smelled of stale coffee and lemon polish. Karen sat at the head of the table, looking like a woman who had just been interrupted in the middle of a magic trick. To her right sat a man I assumed was Holloway, a heavy-set individual with a tie that was too short for his torso. Karen's face went white. "Luna," she said, half rising from her chair. "We were just handling the administrative details. There was no need to bore you with this." I walked to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table and sat down. I placed my purse on the table with a heavy thud. "I love administrative details, Karen," I said. "I live for them. Please continue, Mr." Holloway cleared his throat. He looked at Karen, then at me, clearly assessing the risk of a physical altercation. "Ms. Hayes," he said, smoothing out a file folder. "While you are a beneficiary in the technical sense, your president, excuse me, Ms. Voss, felt that given the emotional strain you are under, it would be best to handle the reading privately. The will is quite standard." "Read it," I said. Before Holloway could speak, the door opened again. The air in the room shifted instantly. It became colder, sharper. Sloane walked in. She was still wearing the charcoal suit from the memorial, or perhaps a different one that looked exactly like it. She did not look tired. She looked razor-sharp. The man in black, the security detail, stood outside the door and closed it behind her. She looked at Karen, who seemed to shrink in her seat. Then she looked at me. Her gaze was not warm. It was calculating. She was measuring me, deciding if I was a liability or an asset. "You are actually here," she said, sounding mildly surprised. "I received an invite," I lied. Sloane pulled out the chair next to me and sat down. She placed a sleek silver phone on the table and tapped the screen. "Record," she said to the room. "Mr. Holloway bristled. "Ms. Mercer, I do not think that is necessary. This is a private community matter." Sloane looked at him. Her eyes were dead calm. "Everything is necessary when Karen is involved," she said. "Proceed." Holloway sighed. Realizing he had lost control of the room, he opened the folder. "The last will and testament of Maria Hayes," he began. He started reading in a drone, a rapid-fire legal mumble designed to induce sleep. I listened to the clauses, everything to Karen. The clubhouse, the common areas, the contents of the accounts. It was standard for a president, but then came the debts. Holloway paused. He adjusted his glasses. "As for the outstanding liabilities, the estate acknowledges the following encumbrances: the primary mortgage on the property at 402 Maple Lane and the secondary home equity line of credit established 18 months ago." I sat up straighter. "A home equity line of credit. A HELOC. How much?" I asked. Holloway looked annoyed at the interruption. "The principal balance on the line of credit is $150,000. The room spun. $150,000. Mom and Karen had paid off the house 10 years ago. I remembered the party they threw. Where had a mortgage-sized debt come from in the last year and a half? Holloway continued. "As this is a joint liability, the responsibility for repayment falls to the surviving co-signers and the estate." "Co-signers?" I asked. "Plural." Holloway pulled a document from the stack. "Yes, the loan was secured against the equity of the home with Ms. Karen Voss and Ms. Luna Hayes listed as guarantors." The silence that followed was absolute. I looked at Karen. She was studying her fingernails, refusing to meet my eyes. "I never signed a home equity line," I said. My voice was very quiet. Holloway sighed, the sound of a man dealing with a hysterical woman. "Ms. Hayes, I have the document right here. It is notarized. Show me, I said. He slid the paper across the polished wood. I looked at the signature block. There was Karen's signature, bold and sprawling, and below it there was a signature that read Luna Hayes. It was a good forgery, better than the ones on the credit card applications, but it had a tell. The loop on the L was too wide. I made my loops tight. This is not my signature, I said, looking up. Karen finally spoke. Her voice was trembling with fake outrage. Luna, do not do this. Do not dishonor your mother's memory by lying about money. You agreed to help us. You said you would do whatever it took to keep the community running. You signed that paper at the kitchen table. Do you not remember? You were so stressed at work. Maybe you forgot. Gaslighting. She was trying to rewrite my reality in real time. I did not sign this, I repeated. And I certainly did not agree to give you $150,000 to spend on what? Karen. Where is the money? It went to medical bills, Karen shouted, slamming her hand on the table. Your mother's care was expensive. Sloan spoke for the first time since the reading began. We checked the medical billing. Karen, she said. Her voice was bored. Insurance covered 90%. The out-of-pocket maximum was $6,000. Where is the other $144,000? Karen's mouth opened and closed. Holloway intervened. Regardless of the dispute over the allocation of funds, the document is legally binding. The bank will call the note due upon the death of the primary borrower as a cosigner. Ms. Hayes, you are liable. I looked at the lawyer. He knew he had to know. He was too calm about a six-figure discrepancy. Read the rest, Sloan commanded. Holloway hesitated. That is the substance of the financial. Read the rest, Sloan interrupted. The codicil. The addendum dated 3 weeks ago. Holloway froze. He looked at Karen. Karen looked like she was about to be sick. There is a handwritten note, Holloway said dismissively. But it was not properly witnessed. It holds no legal weight. It is merely sentimental ramblings. Read it, I said. Holloway picked up a single sheet of yellow legal paper. He held it as if it were contaminated. He read, To my daughters. If you are reading this, I am gone. I am sorry for the mess. I was too weak to stop her. If there are debts that you do not recognize, please do not pay them blindly. I believe there have been irregularities. Please ask for an audit. I was afraid to say no. I am so sorry. My heart broke. It shattered right there in the conference room. Mom knew. She wasn't just a victim of her spending. She was a hostage to it. She had written this note, hidden it, hoping we would find it. That is enough, Karen said, standing up. She was on morphine. She didn't know what she was writing. This is ridiculous. I am the president. I am the executor. Holloway closed the folder. As I said, the note is not legally binding. Contradicts the formal will. The estate stands as written. Luna, you will need to arrange with the bank regarding the line of credit. He stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. I sat there paralyzed by the weight of the debt and the weight of the betrayal. $150,000. If I didn't pay it, they would take the house. No, they would come after me. They would garnish my wages. They would ruin the credit I had spent my life building. Sloan stood up. She picked up her phone. She leaned over the table, looking Karen dead in the eye. You think you won? She said. You think because you have a lawyer who bought his degree online and a forged signature, you are safe. Karen sneered. Get out, Sloan. Go back to your city. Sloan turned to me. Come on, Luna. I stood up, my legs feeling heavy. We walked out of the office, leaving Karen and Holloway in the silence of their conspiracy. In the hallway, the receptionist pretended to be typing. We walked out into the harsh sunlight of the parking lot. I felt like I couldn't breathe. $150,000. Sloane stopped by her SUV. The security guard opened the door for her. She turned to me. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small black object. It was a USB drive. She pressed it into my hand. Her fingers were cold. "What is this?" I asked. "Mom gave this to the nurse at the hospice," Sloane said. "She told the nurse to give it to me only if Karen tried to take the house." I looked at the drive. "Why didn't you bring this up in there?" I asked. "Because Holloway is her creature," Sloane said. "If he knows this exists, it will disappear. He will burn it, shred it, or bury it. You need to see what is on it first." "Why me?" I asked. "You are the one with the resources." Sloane put her sunglasses back on. "Because Luna," she said, "I am the one she hates. But you are the one she underestimates. She thinks you are just a wallet. She does not think you have the stomach to take her down." She got into the car. "Prove her wrong," she said. The door slammed shut. The SUV pulled away, leaving me standing in the parking lot of a strip mall, holding a piece of plastic that felt heavier than a brick. I got into my car. I locked the doors. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the USB drive twice before I could plug it into the adapter on my laptop. I opened the file explorer. There was only one folder on the drive. The name of the folder was in all caps. Paternity. Do not discuss until memorial. I stared at the screen. The cursor blinked. This was it. The secret that Sloane had whispered. The reason for the difference in how we were treated. The reason Karen felt entitled to my life but afraid of hers. I double-clicked the folder. Inside were 3 PDF files and 1 audio recording. I opened the first PDF. It was a scanned document. It looked old. The paper yellowed even in the digital image. It was a birth certificate. My birth certificate. But it was different from the one I had in my files. The one I used for my passport listed Karen Voss as the president. This one, the original one, had a different name in the box for president. The name was typed in old-fashioned typewriter font. It read unknown. I scrolled down. There was a second page. It was a legal affidavit signed by my mother 34 years ago. It stated that the biological president was aware of the pregnancy but had relinquished all rights in exchange for anonymity. I opened the second file. It was a bank transfer record from the same year I was born. A transfer of $10,000 from an account held by a trust. The trust name was vague. The Archway Foundation. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Karen had married into the HOA when I was 2 years old. I had always been told she adopted the role, that my biological president had died in a car crash before I was born. That was the community lore, the tragic romance. But this suggested a transaction. I opened the third file. It was a letter in handwriting I recognized as Karen's, but it was younger, less jagged. It was addressed to my mother, Maria. It read, "I will do it. I will give the girl my name. I will raise her. But you have to understand the cost. I am saving you from shame. You owe me. And I will expect that debt to be paid every day for the rest of our lives." I covered my mouth with my hand. She hadn't adopted me out of love. She hadn't taken the presidency to save her. She had taken it as a business arrangement. I was the overhead and she had been charging her rent for my existence for 3 decades. That was why she felt no guilt stealing from me. In her mind, I was a product she had purchased. I was her property. I looked at the audio file. I was terrified to play it. But then I remembered the helic. I remembered the smirk on her face in the office. I clicked play. The sound was grainy. It sounded like it had been recorded on a phone hidden in a pocket. I heard Mom's voice. She sounded weak, breathless. "Karen, please," she said. "Luna has done enough. Do not ask her to sign another loan." Then I heard Karen's voice. It was low, menacing. "She is my investment. Maria," she said. I have put 30 years into that girl. I am just withdrawing my dividends. And if you say a word to her, I will tell her the truth about where she came from. I will tell her that her real president didn't die. I will tell her he paid to get rid of her. Do you think she will survive that? The beautiful little Luna. It would break her. The recording ended with the sound of Mom weeping. I sat in my car, tears streaming down my face, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of rage. Pure molten rage. She thought the truth would break me. She thought knowing I was abandoned would make me weak. She was wrong. Knowing I was not her resident didn't break me. It liberated me. I wiped my face. I looked at the legal office where she was probably still sitting, congratulating herself on another successful manipulation. She is not our president. She is just yours. No, she wasn't even mine. She was just a woman who had made the mistake of stealing from a woman who had nothing left to lose. I put the car in gear. I wasn't going back to work. I had a phone call to make. The number was on the business card Sloan had slipped into the folder with the USB drive. Rowan Pike, financial forensic investigator. It was time to audit the books, and I was going to make sure the balance was zero. The address Sloan sent me led to a place that did not look like a place. It was a heavy, unmarked steel door in an alleyway behind the chaotic bustle of the financial district. There was no sign, only a camera lens staring down like a judgment. I looked at the camera and the door clicked open with a heavy magnetic thud. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of expensive scotch and old leather. It was a private members club, the kind of place where decisions about the gross domestic product were made over ice cubes. The room was dimly lit, but I saw her immediately. Sloan was sitting in a high-backed booth in the far corner, a glass of clear liquid in front of her. I walked over. The distance between the door and her table felt like a mile. We were sisters, but looking at her, I felt like we were standing on opposite banks of a wide, toxic river. On her bank, there was safety, power, and the kind of money that insulates you from reality. On my bank, there was debt, deception, and a woman who viewed me as an annuity. I slid into the booth opposite her. I did not order a drink. You look like hell, Sloan said. It was not an insult. It was an observation. I just found out I was purchased, I said, my voice, and that the woman I spent my life serving is not my president. So, excuse me if I'm not camera ready. Sloan took a sip of her drink. She placed the glass down with a precise soft click. She is not my president either, she said. I know, I snapped. That is what you whispered at the memorial. That is why you are the billionaire and I am the cosigner. Because you had a real president and I had whatever Karen is. Sloan shook her head slowly. You think that is why I am here? You think I flew in from Zurich just to rub my pedigree in your face? It crossed my mind, I said. You have been gone a long time, Sloan. You missed the decline. You missed the nights Mom cried because she couldn't balance the checkbook. You missed the way Karen would scream until the veins in her neck popped. I didn't miss it, Sloan said quietly. I escaped it. She leaned forward, the ambient light catching the sharp angle of her cheekbone. Karen is not my biological president, she continued. Mom had an affair with a man named Cyrus Mercer. He was wealthy, married, and very powerful. When she got pregnant with me, Karen found out. She didn't leave her. She leveraged it. She agreed to stay, to keep the community image intact, to raise me as her own. But in exchange, she demanded control. Total control over Mom's finances and eventually over the support payments my biological president sent. I stared at her. The narrative of our childhood was dissolving in front of me. So, she blackmailed Mom, I said. She managed her, Sloan corrected. She kept the paternity secret to keep the checks coming. But I found out when I was 18. That is why I left. Luna, I didn't leave you. I left her. I told her if she ever tried to control me, I would burn her world down. So, she let me go. But she kept you because I was the one she could use. Because you were the one who loved her, she said. Her voice softened, losing its corporate edge. You were the faithful one. The one who believed in the community. She preyed on that, Luna. She weaponized your loyalty. I felt a surge of defensive anger. It was a reflexive habit protecting the neighborhood name even now. So why come back now? I asked. To watch the collapse? No, Sloane said. She reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She slid it across the table. I opened it. It was a printout of a call log 6 months ago. She said Mom called me, Sloane said. I looked at the date. It was late at night. She was crying. Sloane said she was hysterical. She said Karen was getting desperate. She had burned through the last of the trust money. She was starting to open accounts in your name. She said she is going to drag Luna down with her. She is going to bury her in debt so deep she will never get out. I looked up at Sloane. Mom knew. She tried to stop her, Sloane said. But she was sick. She was weak. And she was terrified of her. She begged me to help you. She made me promise that when she was gone, I would step in. I sat back against the leather booth. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. Mom hadn't been complicit. She had been a prisoner. And in her final months, her worry wasn't for herself. It was for me. So, I did some digging, Sloane said. I didn't want to come here with just accusations. I wanted ammunition. She gestured to the empty seat next to me. A man approached the table. He was not the security guard from the memorial. This man was older, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite and eyes that missed nothing. He wore a rumpled suit and carried a thick file folder. Luna, this is Rowan Pike, Sloane said. The man nodded and sat down. He didn't offer a handshake. He just opened the file on the table. Ms. Hayes, Rowan said. His voice was gravelly. The voice of a man who had seen too many bad things to be surprised anymore. I specialize in forensic accounting and financial abuse within domestic partnerships. Your sister hired me to run a background check on Karen Voss. He spun the file around so I could see it. It was a timeline, but it wasn't just of her life in Willow Creek. It went back 40 years. Karen Voss is not her real name, Rowan said. Or rather, it is one of 5 names she has used since 1980. I looked at the list. Karen Vance, Gloria Kendall, Debbie King. She moves in cycles, Rowan explained, tapping the paper with a thick finger. She finds a partner, usually a woman with assets or a steady income but low self-esteem. She integrates herself into their finances. She maximizes the credit. She drains the equity. And when the well runs dry, or when the legal pressure gets too high, she declares bankruptcy, changes states, and starts over. I felt sick. It wasn't just bad luck. It wasn't just incompetence. It was a business model. She has done this before? I asked. 3 times that we can prove, Rowan said. In Ohio, in Florida, and now in Indiana. But this time she stayed longer because of the children, because of the leverage she had over your mother regarding Sloane's paternity. It gave her a steady stream of income she didn't have to work for. But the stream dried up. Sloane said, when I turned 21, the trust payments stopped coming to her. They came to me and I cut her off. That is when she started looking for a new source. Me, I said. Rowan nodded. You were the backup generator. She groomed you to be the provider. She shifted the debt to you slowly so you would get used to the weight. But now that your mother is gone, she is accelerating the memorial loan, the credit cards, the home equity line. She is cashing out. Ms. Hayes. She is preparing to burn this identity and leave you with the ashes. The room seemed to tilt. All those years of lectures about responsibility. All those times she told me I was the only one holding the community together. It was all a script. She was a vampire and I was just the latest vein. What do? I asked. My voice was trembling, but I forced it to steady. I cannot pay that debt. Rowan, I have $12,000 in savings and a leased car. $150,000 will destroy me. Rowan pulled a business card from his pocket and slid it on top of the file. We stop the bleeding first, he said. Right now. Tonight. He took out a pen and flipped the file to a blank page. Step 1, he said. We place a fraud alert on all 3 major credit bureaus. Not a standard alert. An extended fraud victim alert. It requires a police report, which we will discuss in a moment. Step 2, he continued. We freeze your credit. No one, not even you, can open a new account without a PIN number that only you possess. Step 3. We request a full inquiry. The digital glow of the monitor cast long skeletal shadows across the hotel suite. The silence stretched between Sloane and me, tighter than a piano wire on the screen. The transaction record sat like a smoking gun. $380,000 wired to Sloane Mercer Holdings. I stood up from the desk, my chair scraping harshly against the floor. I looked at my sister. For the last 24 hours, I had let myself believe we were on the same side. I had let myself believe that the billionaire expatriate had returned to save the day, but I worked in risk management. I knew that the simplest explanation was usually the correct one, and the simplest explanation was that Sloane was just a bigger shark than Karen. Explain it, I said. My voice was low, devoid of the sisterly warmth that had begun to form between us. Sloane did not flinch. She stood by the window, her silhouette framed by the city lights. I told you, she said calmly. It is a frame. It is a wire transfer, I countered, pointing at the screen. It has your name on it. It went to an offshore account, and it emptied the last of the liquid assets in the estate. You said you came to stop her from stealing. It looks a lot like you just beat her to the punch. Cyrus took a step forward, his hand raising slightly in a placating gesture, but Sloane stopped him with a look. She walked over to the desk. She opened her own laptop, a sleek silver device that looked like it belonged on a spaceship. She turned it around so I could see the screen. This is my corporate structure, she said. I looked. It was a complex web of entities, subsidiaries, and trusts. I bank in Zurich, Singapore, and New York, she said. I do not bank in the Cayman Islands, and I do not use shell companies with names as lazy as Sloane Mercer Holdings. She typed a command. A document appeared. This is a freezing injunction, she said. It is a legal maneuver. My lawyers filed it yesterday morning. It effectively locks any account associated with Karen or the estate. Creates a hold status. If I wanted to steal that money, Luna, I would not have filed a court order alerting the entire banking system to watch the accounts. I read the document. It was dated and time-stamped 24 hours before the suspicious wire transfer. If you froze the accounts, I said, looking up, how did the money move? Because the freeze applies to legitimate transactions. Rowan interjected from the couch. He was holding a stack of printed papers, his eyes scanning them rapidly. But this wire transfer, it bypassed the standard SWIFT network. It was routed through a correspondent bank in Miami. First, Rowan stood up and threw the papers on the desk. It was not Sloane, he said. And it was not Karen. Karen does not know what a correspondent bank is. Karen thinks laundering means washing her clothes. Then who? I asked. Rowan pointed to a name buried in the metadata of the wire instruction. It was not a name. Actually, it was a code. Ah, escrow. I whispered. Error. The family lawyer, Sloane said. Her voice was ice. Rowan nodded. I just ran a background check on Holloway's firm. Not the surface check, but the deep dive. He is not just a small-town probate lawyer. He is a silent partner in 3 different debt consolidation firms. Rowan spread the papers out. They were court dockets, dozens of them. Look at the pattern, he said. He targets communities in distress, usually neighborhoods with significant home equity. He offers to restructure their debt. He sets up a shell company. He convinces them to sign over the deed for protection. Then he drains the equity, defaults on the loans, and buys the property back at auction through another shell. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was a factory, a foreclosure factory. And Mom? I asked. She was the perfect target, Rowan said. She was sick. She was hiding financial secrets, and she had a president who was desperate for cash. Holloway didn't just help Karen. He weaponized her. He used Karen's greed to get the door open. And then he walked in and stripped the house bare. I looked at the transaction on the screen again. So, he created Sloan Mercer Holdings. I realized. He set up the fake account. He moved the money there so that when the audit happens, it leads straight to me. Sloan finished. He knows I am the only one with the resources to fight him. So, he wants to disqualify me. He wants to paint me as the predator, so the judge will grant her full control of the estate. I sat down heavily. The scope of it was nauseating. We were not just fighting a bad president. We were fighting a professional liquidation machine. I looked at Sloan. I felt a wave of shame. I had doubted her. I had assumed the worst because it was easier to believe she was greedy than to believe she was innocent. I am sorry, I said quietly. I saw the name and I panicked. Sloan closed her laptop. She walked over to where I was sitting. For the first time, she didn't look like a titan of industry. She looked like a tired older sister. I do not blame you, she said. You have spent your whole life being told that money is a weapon. Why wouldn't you think I was using it? She pulled up a chair and sat opposite me. Can I tell you the truth? She asked. I nodded. For years, I thought you were in on it, she said. I stared at her. Me? Sloan nodded. I saw you staying there. I saw you paying the bills. I saw you living in that town. I thought you were doing it because you wanted her approval. I thought you were the good daughter who was happy to enable her as long as she patted you on the head. I thought you were weak, Luna, or worse, that you were waiting for your cut. I felt tears prick my eyes. I wasn't waiting for a cut. I was waiting for a thank you that never came. I stayed because I thought I was the dam, I said. I thought if I left, the water would drown Mom. I know that now, Sloan said. She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was firm. When Mom called me that night when she was crying, she didn't talk about herself. She talked about you. She said, Sloan, you have to save Luna. She is going to eat her alive. That was when I knew you weren't her partner. You were her final meal. We sat there for a moment, the silence no longer hostile. It was the silence of 2 soldiers realizing they had been shooting at each other in the dark and finally seeing the real enemy on the horizon. Okay, I said, wiping my eyes. We know who the enemy is. We know how she operates. Now, how do we kill her? Rowan cleared his throat. We go to probate, he said. But we do not go to defend. We go to prosecute. He pulled a whiteboard over from the corner of the suite. He picked up a marker. We have the forged medical consent form, he wrote. That proves undue influence and elder abuse. We have the fake Sloan account. I added. I can trace the IP address to Holloway's office. That proves fraud and embezzlement. We have the credit inquiries, Sloan said. The ones made at 3 o'clock in the morning. That proves identity theft. And we have the camera footage from the hospital. Cyrus said from the corner. The man in the black suit. Rowan nodded. We build a timeline. We show the judge that every single move Karen made in the last 6 months was orchestrated by HOA to bypass the will and liquidate the assets before probate even started. But we have to be careful, I said. HOA knows the law better than we do. He will have an answer for everything. He will say Mom consented. He will say the signatures are real. Then we prove they are not, Sloane said. She turned to me. You said you work in risk compliance. You analyze patterns. Yes, I said. Then analyze Karen, she said. Find the glitch. Karen is sloppy. HOA is precise. The crack in their armor will be where Karen tried to improvise. I thought about the key. The key I had found in Mom's coat. The one Karen had snatched back with such terror. The key, I said. She is terrified of that key. It doesn't fit the house. It doesn't fit the car. It is a storage unit, Rowan said. Or a lockbox. If HOA is the architect, I said, thinking aloud. Then Karen is just the employee. Employees always keep insurance. They keep something to protect themselves in case the boss decides to cut them loose. Karen kept something, I said. That is what is behind the furnace or in the shed or wherever that key goes. We need to file the petition tomorrow, Sloane said. We need to force them into the light. Once we file the fraud allegations, the assets are frozen. HOA can't move the money out of the Cayman account. But once we file, I said, they will know we are coming. They will attack. Let them attack, Sloane said. I have lawyers who eat women like HOA for breakfast. But we need you, Luna. You are the witness. You are the one who lived in the house. You are the one who can look the judge in the eye and say, that is not my signature. I looked at the three of them. Sloane, the power, Rowan, the logic, Cyrus, the shield, and me, the evidence. I will do it, I said. I will sign the affidavit. I will accuse her. We spent the next 6 hours building the file. We scanned every document. We organized the emails. We built a visual map of the fraud that was so clear even a child could understand it. By midnight, we were done. The petition was ready to be filed at the courthouse as soon as the doors opened at 8 o'clock. I stood by the window, looking out at the sleeping city. I felt exhausted, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel heavy. The weight of the secret was gone. My phone buzzed on the glass desk. I walked over to pick it up. I expected it to be a confirmation from the online filing system. It was a text message from a number I didn't recognize. I opened it. The screen was bright in the dim room. Subject: Final warning. The body of the text was short. If you file those papers tomorrow, you will destroy more than just Karen. You want the truth. Fine. But are you ready to know who Sloane's real president really is? And are you ready to know what your mother traded to get that money? She didn't just sell her silence. Luna, she sold you. I stared at the words. She sold you. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at Sloane, who was asleep on the couch, her face soft in the shadows. She was bluffing. She had to be. Mom was a victim. She was weak. Yes, but she wouldn't have sold me. But the doubt was a worm, and it was burrowing deep. I looked at the phone again. There was a second message. Check your email. I opened my email app. There was a message from an anonymous sender. Attached was a single image. It was a scan of a document. It looked old, 34 years old. It was an adoption agreement, but it wasn't a standard adoption. It was a private contract. I zoomed in on the terms. Party A. The biological president agrees to pay the sum of $500,000 to Party B, Maria Hayes. In exchange, Party B agrees to assume full legal custody of the infant Luna and permanently waive any right to child support, inheritance, or contact with Party A. And then the kicker. Party B agrees that the infant shall never know the identity of Party A. If this clause is breached, Party B agrees to repay the full sum with interest. I looked at the signature, Maria Hayes, and below it, the signature of Party A. It was redacted, blacked out with heavy marker, but the date was clear. It was signed 3 days after I was born. I felt like the floor had opened up. Mom hadn't just protected me. She had been paid to keep me. The $500,000, that was the money Karen had lived on for years. That was the community money. I wasn't just a daughter. I was a transaction. I was the golden goose that had laid the first egg. And Karen had been eating off it for 3 decades. I looked at Sloane. Did she know if I filed the papers, this would come out? It would be part of the public record. The world would know that my mother took $500,000 to hide my president. I looked at the sleeping form of my sister. I remembered what she said. She is not our president. She is just yours. She was wrong. She wasn't mine. And apparently neither was my mother. I gripped the phone. The pain was blinding. But then a cold, hard clarity washed over me. They used this to control Mom. They use this guilt to make her compliant. They think they can use it to control me. I looked at the text message again. I typed a reply. My fingers didn't shake. I typed, "Bring it." I hit send. I wasn't Mom. I wasn't going to be blackmailed into silence. If the truth burned everything down, then I would stand in the ashes and build something new. I turned to the computer. I hit the button to submit the probate filing. Upload complete. The war was on. The probate court of Willow Creek was not designed for drama. It was a room of beige carpet, fluorescent lighting, and the smell of stale coffee and bureaucracy. It was a place where board clerks stamped forms and families quietly argued over china sets. But today, the air in courtroom 3 was thick enough to choke on. I sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by Rowan and Sloane's lead counsel, a woman named Eleanor Vance, who wore a suit sharp enough to cut glass. Sloane sat behind me, a silent, imposing force. Across the aisle, Karen sat with Arthur Holloway. Karen had chosen her costume carefully. She was not wearing the sharp suit from the memorial. Instead, she wore a soft oatmeal-colored cardigan and corduroy pants. She held a handkerchief in her hand, which she dabbed at her dry eyes every time the judge looked in her direction. She was playing the role of the bewildered, grieving president to perfection. She looked like a woman who just wanted to mourn, but was being bullied by her greedy, estranged daughters. Judge Reynolds, a man with a face like a crumpled paper bag and zero patience for theatrics, tapped his gavel. "We are here regarding the estate of Maria Hayes," Judge Reynolds said. "We have a petition to freeze assets based on allegations of fraud and a countermotion to validate outstanding debts against the estate. Mr. Holloway, you may proceed." Holloway stood up. He smoothed his tie. He had the slick, practiced confidence of a man who knew exactly where the bodies were buried because he had dug the holes himself. "Your Honor," Holloway began, his voice dripping with faux sincerity. "This is a tragedy. A simple tragedy. Ms. Voss has lost her community pillar of 30 years. And now, while the dirt is still fresh, her stepdaughter, who has been absent for years, has swept in with her high-priced legal team to terrorize her." He gestured to Sloane, then to me. "Ms. Luna Hayes has been the co-signer on the community's financial instruments for years," Holloway continued. "She was a willing participant. She stepped up to help her mother, now influenced by the sudden appearance of her billionaire sister. She is trying to renege on those obligations. She is trying to leave her grieving president with debts they took on together as a community unit." He picked up a piece of paper. "We have a home equity line of credit for $150,000, he said. "Signed by Luna Hayes. We have personal loans signed by Luna Hayes. These are not frauds, Your Honor. These are the desperate measures of a community trying to pay for medical care. To call them fraud now is simply buyer's remorse." Judge Reynolds looked at me. "Ms. Hayes, do you deny signing these documents? I stood up. My legs felt steady. The fear that had paralyzed me for years was gone, replaced by the cold clarity of the evidence in front of me. I did not sign them, Your Honor, I said clearly, and neither did my mother. Holloway scoffed. We have notarized acknowledgments. Rowan stood up. He didn't use flowery language. He placed a thick binder on the judge's bench. Your Honor, Rowan said, if you look at tab A, you will see a forensic analysis of the digital applications for these loans. The judge opened the binder. Every single application was submitted between 2 and 4 in the morning, Rowan said, from an IP address registered to the residence of Karen Voss. At those hours, my client was in her own townhouse 2 hours away. We have cell tower data to prove her location. Rowan flipped a page. Furthermore, look at the verification phone number listed on the applications. It ends in 0198. Ms. Hayes' actual number ends in 0199. We called the number on the application. It is a burner phone. We traced the purchase of that phone to a convenience store in Willow Creek. He held up a still image from a security camera. It showed Karen Voss wearing a baseball cap buying the phone with cash. Karen shifted in her seat. The grieving president act faltered for a second. That is circumstantial, Holloway argued. Ms. Voss buys phones for work. Rowan ignored him. He turned to the judge. But the smoking gun is not the phone, Your Honor. It is the handwriting. Rowan projected an image onto the screen mounted on the wall. On the left was the signature from the home equity line. On the right was a piece of paper that looked like it had been fished out of a trash can. It was wrinkled and stained with coffee. We recovered this from the recycling bin in the defendant's home office, Rowan said. The page was covered in scribbles. It was a practice sheet. Someone had written Luna Hayes over and over again, 50 times, trying to get the loop of the L just right, trying to match the slant. And at the bottom of the page, Rowan said, the writer got frustrated. They wrote a note to themselves. Too tight. Relax the wrist. Rowan zoomed in on the note. We had a handwriting analyst compare that note to known samples of MS. Karen Voss's writing, Rowan said. It is a 100% match. A woman does not practice her own resident's signature 50 times, unless she intends to use it without her permission. The courtroom was silent. Judge Reynolds looked at the screen, then at Karen. Karen was gripping the table, her knuckles white. Mr. Holloway, the judge asked, do you have an explanation for why your client was rehearsing her resident's signature? Holloway didn't blink. He was a professional. He knew when a battle was lost and he knew how to pivot to the next trench. Ms. Voss was distraught, Holloway said smoothly. Her wife was dying. She was managing a mountain of paperwork. Perhaps she was testing pens. But that is irrelevant, Your Honor, because those loans are not the primary issue today. Holloway reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a blue folder. The primary issue is the estate itself, Holloway said, and the fact that the plaintiffs are operating under an outdated will. I felt a chill run down my spine. Sloan leaned forward. We have a new last will and testament, Holloway announced. Signed by Maria Hayes 3 weeks before she died. He walked up to the bench and handed the document to the judge. He dropped a copy on our table. I grabbed it. My eyes scanned the text. It was short. It revoked all previous wills. It left the house, the cars, and the residuary estate, which would include any hidden funds entirely to Karen Voss. It explicitly disinherited Sloan Mercer, and it left me, my love and gratitude, but 0 assets. The signature at the bottom was shaky. It looked like Mom's writing when she was heavily medicated. This changes everything, Holloway said, a smug smile touching his lips. As the sole beneficiary, Ms. Voss has the right to manage the assets as she sees fit. The fraud allegations are moot because effectively she was borrowing from herself. Karen sat up straighter. She looked at me and for a second the mask slipped completely. She looked triumphant. She looked like she had just played the ace she had been holding up her sleeve for 30 years. Judge Reynolds studied the document. This appears to be in order. It is witnessed. I looked at the witness names. They were two people I didn't know. Probably friends of Holloway. It is a forgery, I whispered to Sloane. Mom would never do this. She wrote that letter in the safety deposit box. She wanted to protect us. Sloane didn't answer. She was looking at the document with a jeweler's loupe she had pulled from her purse. She was studying the paper itself. Then she handed the loupe to Cyrus. Check the code, she said. Cyrus looked. He nodded. Sloane stood up. Your Honor, she said. Her voice was calm, contrasting with the panic rising in my throat. May I approach? The judge nodded. Sloane walked to the bench. She didn't look at Karen. She looked at the document in the judge's hand. Mr. Holloway claims this document was signed 3 weeks ago, Sloane said. That would be October 21st. Correct, Holloway said. Sloane pointed to the bottom corner of the paper. This document is printed on legal stock from a specific manufacturer, Sloane said. You can see the batch code here in the watermark. It is faint, but it is there. She pulled out her phone and opened a website. I am on the manufacturer's website, she said. I am entering the batch code XJ942. She held the phone up for the judge to see. This batch of paper was manufactured on November 1st, Sloane said. 10 days after my mother supposedly signed this will. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens when a bomb stops ticking and simply sits there waiting. Unless my mother was a time traveler, Sloane said, her voice turning into a blade. She could not have signed a document on paper that did not exist yet. I looked at Karen. Her face had gone gray. She looked at Holloway, panic flaring in her eyes. Holloway froze for the first time. The smooth lawyer looked rattled. He grabbed the copy from our table and held it up to the light, checking the watermark. It seems, Sloane said, turning to face them, that in your rush to steal everything, you forgot to check the supply closet inventory. Judge Reynolds slammed the document down on his desk. His face was red. Mr. Holloway, he boomed. You had better have a spectacular explanation for this. My client, Holloway stammered. My client provided the document. I assumed. You assumed you could play this court for a fool, the judge snapped. He looked at Karen. Ms. Voss, I am placing an immediate injunction on every asset in your name. I am ordering a full forensic audit of this new will, and if I find one more discrepancy, I am referring this matter to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. Karen shrank into her cardigan. She looked small. She looked defeated, but she didn't look stopped. She looked at me, and her eyes were full of a dark, festering hate. She mouthed something. Couldn't hear it, but I read her lips. You will pay. Judge Reynolds banged his gavel. We will reconvene in 48 hours for a final evidentiary hearing, the judge ordered. I want every bank record, every medical log, and every witness ready. And Ms. Voss, do not leave the state. The bailiff moved to stand near Karen, not arresting her yet, but marking her. We walked out of the courtroom. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving me shaking. We had won the skirmish, but the war wasn't over. Karen was cornered, and cornered animals were the most dangerous kind. Sloane put her arm around my shoulders. You did good, she said. We caught them. I said, the paper batch. That was brilliant. Cyrus keeps track of everything, Sloane said. Even paper supply chains. We walked through the heavy double doors into the hallway. The air was cooler out here. Ms. Hayes. A voice called out from a bench near the exit. I turned. A woman was standing there. She was older, wearing a raincoat and holding a large handbag. She looked nervous. I recognized her instantly. It was Mrs. Gable. She had been Mom's best friend for 20 years. They used to play bridge together on Tuesdays. Mrs. Gable? I asked. What are you doing here? She walked over, clutching her bag tight. She looked around to make sure Karen wasn't behind us. I was in the back, she whispered. I saw what happened. I saw her lie about the will. She reached into her bag. Her hands were trembling. Your mother gave me this, she said. About a month ago, she came to my house. She was scared. Luna, she said Karen was listening to her calls. She said she couldn't keep it in the house anymore. She pulled out a small black object. It was an old-fashioned dictaphone, the kind doctors used to use. She told me, if Karen looks like she's winning, you give this to Luna, Mrs. Gable said. She made me swear. I took the recorder. Felt heavy. Thank you, Mrs. Gable, I said. She touched my cheek. She loved you girls, she said. She made mistakes, big ones, but she loved you. She turned and hurried away as if afraid Karen would appear in a puff of smoke. I looked at the recorder. There was a small cassette inside. Play it, Sloane said. We stepped into a quiet alcove. Cyrus stood guard, blocking the view from the courtroom doors. I pressed the play button. The tape hissed. Then Mom's voice cut through the static. It was weak, breathless, but clear. Luna, she said, if you are listening to this, I failed. I couldn't stop her. There was a pause, the sound of her breathing heavy. I know you found out about the money, about the adoption. I am so sorry. I sold my rights to keep you safe, but I ended up selling you to a woman who saw you as a paycheck. I closed my eyes. Hearing her admit it hurt more than reading it. But you need to know, Mom continued. Her voice dropped to a terrified whisper. The adoption contract, the money, that is not the only leverage she has. Karen isn't just a thief. Luna, she is a cleaner. I opened my eyes. A cleaner. 30 years ago, she whispered. The night your biological president supposedly died, Karen was there. She wasn't just a witness. Luna, she fixed it. That is why the trust pays her. That is why they never ask questions. She knows where the body really is. The tape clicked off. I stared at the device. My biological president didn't die in a car crash. And he didn't just pay to get rid of me. Karen had fixed it. Sloane's face was white. She is not just a con artist, she whispered. She is a blackmailer. She has been blackmailing my president's family and your president's estate for a murder. The text message from the night before flashed in my mind. She is not the only thing you need to fear. I looked back at the courtroom doors. Karen was still in there. She wasn't fighting for the house. She wasn't fighting for the money. She was fighting to keep the basement closed. Because if we opened it, we wouldn't just find stolen cash. We would find the reason my president never came for me. I put the recorder in my pocket. Let's go, I said. My voice was harder than it had ever been. We are not waiting for the hearing. We are going back to the house and we are taking a sledgehammer to that basement floor. The 48 hours leading up to the final hearing were a blur of caffeine, toner cartridges, and the cold, hard realization that my entire life had been a fabrication. We did not go back to the house to smash the basement floor. Rowan advised against it. He said that if we destroyed the physical structure, Karen could claim we tampered with evidence. Instead, we handed the recording from Mrs. Gable to the district attorney and let the wheels of criminal justice begin to turn in the background. But the probate hearing, the battle for my name, my debt, and my freedom, that was the main event, and I was ready to end it. We returned to courtroom 3 at 9 o'clock on Friday morning. The atmosphere had shifted. Karen was no longer wearing her cozy cardigan. She was back in a suit, but it looked too big for her, as if she had shrunk under the weight of the looming exposure. Arthur Holloway sat beside her, drumming his fingers on the table, his confident veneer showing hairline fractures. Judge Reynolds entered the room. He did not look at the gallery. He looked straight at the defense table. "Mr. Holloway," the judge said, his voice flat, "I trust you have an explanation for the paper batch discrepancy we discovered in the last session." Holloway stood up. "We are withdrawing the document titled Last Will and Testament, Your Honor. My client misremembered the date of signing. We are reverting to the original will." The judge narrowed his eyes. "Misremembered? I will note that for the record. Now the plaintiffs have submitted new evidence. A substantial amount of it." Rowan stood up. He walked to the center of the room. He held the small black dictaphone in his hand as if it were a grenade. "Your Honor," Rowan said, "we would like to enter Exhibit C into the record. This is a recording made by the deceased, Maria Hayes, for weeks prior to her death. It was entrusted to a third party who has sworn an affidavit regarding its chain of custody." "Objection," Holloway said, though his voice lacked heat. "Hearsay. The deceased cannot be cross-examined." "This falls under the exception of a dying declaration," Rowan countered. "And more importantly, it speaks directly to the state of mind of the testator regarding the financial instruments in question." Judge Reynolds nodded. "Play it." Rowan pressed the button. The hiss of the tape filled the silent courtroom. Then Mom's voice, weak, terrified, and heartbreakingly familiar, echoed off the walls. "It is a trap, Luna. It was always a trap." Karen flinched. She stared at the table, refusing to look at the recorder. The recording continued. "Karen and Arthur, they sat me down last night. They told me the money from the trust was gone. They said if I didn't sign the power of attorney, they would release the adoption papers. They would tell the world who Sloan's president is. But that is not all." There was a pause on the tape, a ragged intake of breath. "They need you, Luna. They need your credit score. Karen cannot borrow money anymore. Her name is blacklisted in 3 states. They need a clean name to wash the debt through. You are not just my daughter to them. You are the shield. They are going to pile the debt on you so that when the house of cards falls, you are the one buried under the rubble." Arthur called it insulating the liability. The tape clicked off. The silence that followed was heavier than lead. I looked at Karen. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Holloway. And Holloway was looking at the exit sign. Insulating the liability. That was what I was. I wasn't the responsible child. I wasn't the good daughter. I was a human shell company. Rowan placed the recorder on the judge's bench. "We have traced the flow of funds, Your Honor," Rowan said. He projected a new chart onto the screen. The $150,000 from the home equity line, the $25,000 from the memorial loan, the credit card cash advances, none of it went to medical bills. He pointed to a large red block on the chart. 80% of the funds were transferred to a firm called AC Consulting, Rowan said. "We subpoenaed the bank records of AC Consulting. The signatory is Arthur Holloway." The judge turned his gaze on the lawyer. Rowan continued. "These were not legal fees. These were payments for silence. Payments to maintain the network of shell companies that Ms. Voss used to hide her past and payments to the cleaner services that Ms. Voss has been utilizing since 1990. Karen slammed her hand on the table. "That is a lie," she shouted. She stood up, her face red. "I was protecting this community. I did what I had to do." "Sit down, Ms. Voss," the judge barked, but Karen was unraveling the narrative she had built for 30 years. The story of the sacrificing president. The martyr was dissolving. "She was expensive," Karen yelled. pointing at the empty space where Mom used to be. Her silence cost money. The blackmails cost money. I had to pay them off. And Luna, she had a job. She had good credit. Why shouldn't she contribute? I raised her. I bought her clothes. I gave her a name. She owed me. There it was, the transactional truth. She believed she had purchased the right to destroy me. Sloane stood up next. She didn't shout. She didn't yell. She walked to the witness stand with the grace of a predator. Ms. Mercer, the judge said. Sloane placed a file on the ledge. Ms. Voss claims she was protecting the community, Sloane said. But here is the correspondence between Karen Voss and the trustees of my biological president's estate. She opened the file. She attempted to petition for guardianship of my trust fund 6 times after I turned 18, Sloane said. She forged letters from my mother claiming I was mentally unstable. She tried to have me committed to a facility in Nevada so she could assume power of attorney over my assets. She looked directly at Karen. She didn't want to protect us, she said. She wanted to consume us. And when I escaped, she turned her appetite toward the only thing left, my sister. Karen was shaking her head, muttering to herself. And finally, Cyrus stepped forward. He placed a laptop on the clerk's desk. Regarding the allegation that Ms. Mercer attempted to loot the estate via the Cayman Island transfer, Cyrus said. We have identified the individual who initiated the wire. He played the video from the hospital hallway, the man in the black suit. Then he played a second video. It was surveillance footage from the parking lot of Holloway's law firm. The same man walked out of the office. He took off the black jacket. He got into a Honda Civic. We ran the plates, Cyrus said. The car is registered to Marcus Dean. He is a paralegal employed by Holloway and Associates. Cyrus looked at Holloway. He is not a bodyguard, Cyrus said. He is an actor, and he was paid $5,000 from the AC consulting account on the day of the transfer. It was over. The frame was broken. The lies were exposed. Judge Reynolds took off his glasses. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. He looked like a man who wanted to take a shower. I have heard enough, the judge said. He picked up his gavel. Felt like he was picking up a weapon. Mr. Holloway, the judge said, his voice deadly quiet. I am referring you to the State Bar Association for immediate disbarment. I am also referring this entire file, including the evidence of embezzlement, fraud, and elder abuse, to the district attorney. Holloway slumped in his chair. He knew the game was up. And Ms. Voss, the judge continued, turning his eyes to Karen. Karen looked up. She looked small. She looked old. The petition to validate the debts against the estate is denied. The judge ruled. The court finds that these debts were incurred through fraudulent means and identity theft. Ms. Luna Hayes is absolved of all liability regarding the home equity line, the personal loans, and the credit cards opened in her name. I let out a breath that felt like it had been stuck in my chest for 10 years. Furthermore, the judge said, I am issuing an immediate order of protection. Ms. Voss, you are to vacate the property at 402 Maple Lane immediately. The house is remanded to the original trust with Ms. Luna Hayes as the sole trustee until probate is finalized. Karen stood up. But where will I go? She stammered. That is my house. It never was, the judge said. You were just a squatter with a marriage license. The gavel banged. Case closed. 2 bailiffs moved toward the defense table. They weren't there to escort them out. They were there to take them into custody. The district attorney hadn't waited. The recording about the cleaner and the body had triggered an immediate arrest warrant. Karen looked at me as the bailiff took her arm. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked confused. She looked like a woman who couldn't understand why her calculator had stopped working. I did it for you, Luna, she whispered. I made you tough. I looked her in the eye. You didn't make me tough, Karen, I said. You just made me tired. And now I am going to rest. She was led away. I watched her go. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel happy. I felt light. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. The air smelled of autumn leaves and freedom. Rowan was on his phone already coordinating with the credit bureaus to wipe the inquiries from my report. Cyrus was scanning the perimeter. Ever the protector. Sloane stopped on the steps. She put on her sunglasses. It is done, she said. I looked at the documents in my hand. The court order. The freedom papers. I turned to her. You were right, I said. About what? She asked. About what you whispered at the memorial, I said. She is not our president. She is just yours. I shook my head. I misunderstood you, I said. I thought you were telling me that I was alone, that I was stuck with her. Sloane lowered her sunglasses. No, she said softly. I was telling you that she was your burden because you were the only one strong enough to carry it. But I should have told you to put it down sooner. I looked at the street. I looked at the world that was opening up in front of me. A world without debt, without fear, without the crushing weight of being the good daughter. I thought about the adoption papers, the money Mom took, the secrets in the basement that the police were uncovering right now. It was a tragedy. It was a horror story, but it wasn't my story anymore. So, Sloane asked, now that you know everything, now that the slate is clean, what do you choose? She gestured to the waiting car. You can go back to your job, she said. You can pretend this never happened, or you can come with me. Mercer Global needs a director of risk compliance, someone who can spot a lie in a spreadsheet from a mile away. I looked at Rowan. He gave me a small nod. I looked at the courthouse behind me. I smiled. It was the first real smile I had felt in months. You were right, Sloane, I said. She is not our president. She was just the excuse. She was the excuse Mom used to be afraid. She was the excuse I used to be small. I took a step down the stairs and today, I said, I stopped being the price of their silence. I walked toward the car, leaving the shadow of the courthouse behind me. I wasn't Luna the victim. I wasn't Luna the shield. I was just Luna. And for the first time in 34 years, the account was paid in full.